this video we take a look at sewing with stretchy fabric. Stay with me and I'll show you how. Stretch fabrics, such as jersey, knit and ribbed fabrics, are used for making comfortable, flexible garments. They can come in two-way stretch, which stretch in one direction, either crosswise or lengthwise. This gives moderate flexibility and is generally used for t-shirts or simple skirts and dresses. Then there is four-way stretch, which stretches both crosswise and lengthwise. This gives maximum flexibility and is generally used in sportswear. Due to its flexibility, stretch fabric can be a pain to work with, but we'll take a look at a few stitches we can use to make life easier. So let's get started. It's important to use the correct needle for sewing stretch fabric. So use a stretch needle or jersey or ballpoint needle. These needles push through the fibres of the fabric rather than piercing the fabric like a standard needle, which can snag and damage the fabric. Using a standard straight stitch on stretch fabric will cause distortion such as rippling or puckering. It will also limit the movement of the fabric and you'll be unable to stretch it fully. There are a couple of methods we can use to avoid these issues. The first being a narrow zigzag stitch. We set our machine to the zigzag setting and we set the widths to between 0 and 1. I usually keep it around 1. And we sew our seam with the zigzag stitch, just guiding the fabric through, try not to pull or stretch it. We now have a neat seam with no puckering and the stitches are able to stretch with the fabric. We can also sew a straight seam using the stretch stitch function on the sewing machine. We set our stitch length dial to the stretch stitch, which will be either a red or a blue S, and we select the straight stitch, shown in blue as 3 parallel dashes. And we sew the seam, again not pulling or stretching the fabric, just guiding it. The machine works the needle back and forth, staggering the stitches, which gives us a neat straight stitch, which also stretches with the fabric. Although stretch fabric tends not to fray, we might want to finish the raw edges for neatness. I've done a couple of examples here, where the machine combines a straight stitch, and every couple of stitches it does an overlooking stitch. Some machines can have dozens of stretch stitch functions. Even on a basic machine, there's too many to go over in one video. The best thing to do is to use scraps of fabric and experiment and see what your machine can do. To sew a straight seam with an overlooking stitch, we can either use an overlooking foot or just stitch close to the raw edge. For hemming, we have a couple of options. You could do a standard double fold hem with a zigzag stitch. This needs to be pressed well as it can be quite bulky. Alternatively, we can do a single fold hem, sewn with a zigzag stitch, and trim down the excess close to the seam. For fabric that has a tendency to fray, leaving a raw edge isn't the best option. We can use our twin needle to hem our fabric, set our length to between 2 and 3, and select the straight stitch. We don't need to select a stretch stitch for this. And we sew our hem from the top. This gives us 2 rows of top stitching, and it encases our raw edge in a zigzag stitch below. I have a full tutorial on how to use the double needle, link in the description. For necklines and armholes, we have a couple of options. We can simply fold and stitch the fabric, or we can use tape. To fold and sew the fabric, we select our zigzag stitch on a narrow setting, and we stitch from the inside, gently pulling the fabric to ease it around the curve. If you want to hide your raw edges, you can stitch it from the top using the twin needle. Alternatively, we can use tape or fold over elastic which you can buy by the metre. We line up the raw edge of our fabric with the centre seam of the elastic and fold it over. We set our zigzag stitch to a width between 2 and 3, and we stitch the tape down, keeping the edge of the elastic in line with the centre notch on the presser foot. Go slowly to make sure that the tape is folded over correctly. This gives a neat finish and is especially good for sportswear. Be sure to stitch this from the top side because the underside can come out not quite so neat. And that's how to sew stretch fabric.